serious. Families with incest members, does the rest of the family know / how do they feel about it? My grandma has a half-sister who has twin daughters. One of the twins started dating her first cousin, father's nephew, about 3 or 4 years ago. It caused a bunch of at first. Everyone was disgusted, they got made fun of, the jokes got worse after they had a baby together. The child's forehead looks like it has a dent in it. They are still together, expecting child number 2, and no one really gives a anymore aside from the odd incest joke or two. My great-grandparents were first cousins. They were married for a couple years before they found out and divorced, then remarried and had 4 kids. Anymore we make a couple jokes here and there, but it has been brought up in arguments a few times. It's also fun to tell the younger cousins and see the disgust I must have had when my aunts and uncles told me. Nothing ever happened, but my cousin went through a bad breakup and he tried to put the moves on me by sending dirty texts and a video. I ceased it. Only 2 other people know were my other cousins. We were grossed out and I haven't talked to him since then. I have family on my grandma's side who are first cousins who married each other, arranged marriage. They lived in the same village with a very small population. While it wasn't an issue in the family at marriage, both of their daughters have thalassemia because of it. One of the daughters only has a life expectancy of 30 and has to have blood transfusions monthly. The parents who married them off regret the marriage. Way back in my family's lineage we found evidence of cousins that married, and we joke about not having a family tree, but a family wreath. I don't know how it was treated at the time as this would have been at least 5 generations prior. They know, they deny, I cut them out to my life. My kid was born with massive medical issues and died 2 years ago at the age of 29. Edit, my biological brother raped me, I ended up pregnant and gave birth to a special needs child. He absolutely had messed up genes and died 2 years ago at the age of 29. My grandparents were first cousins. They had 3 kids. Oldest one no issues, second died of lupus in her 30s, and my dad, the youngest, just severely depressed and ADHD. I don't think any of those issues were related to the incest. My grandmother was bat crazy, so they are lucky they turned out as well as they did. My dad was a menopause baby, and she told him his entire life that he was retarded due to that. I do not envy his childhood. One thing that did creep me out is when my uncle passed away earlier this year, in the obituary it said son of the late first name last name X. Margaret Smith. I couldn't believe she actually took her maiden name as her middle name in that situation. Sigh. Edited to add it was Kentucky in the 30s when they married. No one gave a. Don't know if this counts, but my great-grandfather married his daughter-in-law's sister, meaning to my father his step-grandmother on the paternal side and his aunt on his maternal side were the same individual. I don't think they ever had kids though, as my great-grandfather was a lot older by that point. Nobody was too hung up about it, but we don't usually talk about that great-grandfather much, because he was also a serial arsonist who burnt down 5 houses to collect insurance money, and was never caught. One time when my dad was young, his friends set him up on a blind date with a girl and they were really hitting it off, but after a few more dates they discovered they were second cousins, and ended it there. So awkward lol. I don't think this is exactly incest, but it threw me for a loop for a bit. I'm the family historian, and while working on my grandmother's side of the family, I found that I have a great uncle, let's call him Uncle A, who got married to Aunt A and had kids. Aunt A died, and he married her sister, Aunt B, and they had some kids. They got divorced, and she married his brother Uncle B, and they had some kids as well. Also, it was apparently common back in the day for siblings to marry into the same family. My mum's dad sexually assaulted some of his daughters when they were around 13/14, and one of the daughters continued sleeping with him / having sex with him into a much later age. She's had a few children with him. My family do not really acknowledge it at all and keep it on the hush. The children are entirely aware that their granddad also pairs up as their dad. No one talks about it, but everyone knows it. It's actually a really weird sort of situation, because some of my mum's sisters despises her dad for what he did, and the effect it had on her siblings as well as mother growing up, as well as hates her sister for continuing to do so, but a lot of the others don't even seem to think there's anything messed up with the situation at all, and talk about how they love him / he was amazing etc. and completely turn a blind eye to it. This could be a facade, I don't know. The situation goes a lot deeper than just the above, and it's very awkward / uncomfortable when he's brought up. My great-grandparents were first cousins. No one gives or gave a. 1910s rural Ireland. As far as I'm aware it was arranged to keep a farm in the family. My great-grandfather was killed in 1925 by a runaway horse and cart when my granny was 4, and they lived with her grandparents on and off, and with her uncle and his wife on and off. The uncle was an eccentric postman, inventor, beekeeper and photographer. He used to take them on little holidays to beaches and landmarks, paid for by photographing people next to landmarks. She had many fond memories of her uncle and aunt. Her grandfather and all other uncles were cars, basically heavy haulage before trucks. They had transport solutions for everything pulled by teams of horses. Stone, milk, dry goods, you name it. They also ran a horse-drawn bus. Funny enough, none of them stayed in transport after mechanization. By that time they'd all come up enough in the world to get their kids well educated. Several of them became teachers, nurses, doctors, priests, nuns etc. So basically it all worked out. My mom's grandparents were first cousins. They had 8 kids, one died of cancer at age 18, and my grandpa has Asperger's. My family doesn't really talk about it much other than it makes for an awkward joke every once in a while. They lived in Brazil in a small town way back when, so I guess it wasn't as big of a deal as it would be today. My mom dated her first cousin a few years back. The entire family was disgusted. We all tried to talk sense into her. They were public with their PDA. Not even remotely the craziest or trashiest thing my mom has done. She's a piece of work, bless her heart. We pretend we don't know about it, and we've mostly stopped associating with that side of the family because the new generation have no qualms about dating relatives either. Given the family tree so far, they're all double or triple related by now, and it's just freaking weird. Pretty dark, but some genetic testing and a bit of digging has revealed that my mother was very likely conceived through incestuous rape between my mother's mother, my grandmother, and her own uncle, my great uncle. The people who know the truth for certain are long since dead, save for the great uncle, but he's not far off himself. But it would explain a whole heaping pile of family secrets, and, you know, the results of the genetic testing, which are fairly hard to deny. I don't think anybody in the family knows. They're a vast distant family rife with lies and terrible people who likely wouldn't care if they knew. Though she was adopted out at a young age, my own mother fits right in with them. She's a dumpster fire of a human being though, whether that's from her genes or her own abusive upbringing is yet to be determined. If the family didn't know, they most certainly wouldn't stop the behavior. I met said great uncle only once in my life. He aggressively hit on me upon learning I was his niece. I was maybe 14/15 at the time. When this was mentioned to the rest of the family in shock, that someone would be so disgusting so openly, I was told, oh, yeah, Uncle so and so is just like that. You learn to get used to it. Absolutely sickening. Oh, I just remembered a story my grandma told me years ago, so not somebody I'm related to, but so grandma's friends with this couple that, when they met, originally bonded over both being adopted. They fall in love, have 3 perfectly healthy kids, get some equally healthy grandkids etc. The fact that they have the exact same birthday is just a convenient coincidence. And maybe a bit of a at least he'll never forget when mine is joke. And then one of them gets sick and needs a donor, so off to get tested they go. Yup, twins. Grandma gets told matter-of-factly over lunch in a busy restaurant during the "so we haven't had time to see each other in almost 5 years. Here's what's been happening" part of the conversation. They had a big family-wide what do we do discussion, but since they were 30 odd years in with no obvious ill effects, they pretty much just updated a dozen or so medical records and called it a day. My great-grandparents were first cousins. Most of the family makes jokes about it because we weren't close to them. My grandmother just says that's how things were back then. It was the 1930s, grandma. No, it wasn't. And that they really loved each other, which is all that matters. There doesn't seem to be any weird birth defects or illnesses in their 4 kids or any subsequent generations. So I guess it all worked out. My 2 cousins, twice removed, ran away with each other when they were 15 to 16. They got married, even though everyone was upset about it. Eventually, the family just accepted that they weren't going to stop being married to each other, especially when the couple had 2 kids. It became a "it is what it is" type of situation. One of their kids was born with a congenital heart defect and needed surgery to fix their heart, and the other was born with a cleft lip and scoliosis. Welp. Been a long time Reddit user and have a story to share on this. Here's my story, although this thread is older and probably won't be read, and I'm at work and not trying to break down. Where do I begin? My oldest brother sexually and physically abused me and 2 of my other siblings growing up. For a long time, no one knew anything. I was a scared and hurt weak child. Still am in a lot of ways. He probably started with me and older brother. I'm the youngest, and went on to start abusing our youngest sister from an early age. God, this kills me. She told a friend what was happening, went on to spread to the teacher, and then of course child services got involved. My brother was kicked out, moved in with my dad. The state was pressing charges, but my mom disappointed me greatly when she basically made the court case go away by convincing my youngest sister to not press charges. I was a teenager at the time, and now in my mid-20s. I don't know how or why, but he turned his life around and apparently everyone forgave him. Except me. I want to king murder him. I still see evil in him. I don't see a person. I see the devil. I want him to pay for everything he did. I couldn't take it anymore and let out all my feelings after these years to my mom, and basically no one gives a. I king hate my family and I king hate my life. I felt nothing but trapped and alone my entire life. I refuse all contact and any functions as a family that includes him. If I see him, I'm afraid of what I'll do. I think this more or less qualifies. Obviously this is my throwaway because it is/was a weird family dynamic. To add to stereotypes, this takes place in the deep south. This gets confusing and long, so here is this. TLDR, my aunt also became my grandma. So my grandma went through a few husbands, most died or left, and my dad's dad, my biological grandpa, left when my dad was young, and died a long time ago. I never met him. Anyhow, my dad married his first wife a long time ago, and had a kid. They divorced, but his, now, ex-wife married another man we will call G. Well, G has an older brother we will call K. After a few years, K meets my grandma and they get married. This means my grandma went from being my dad's ex-wife's mother-in-law to her sister-in-law. Weird, but not where this gets to where I'd post about it. K is a nice guy and I have fond memoirs of him being my grandpa, although not my biological one. Well, my grandma dies and K shortly after decides to marry my aunt, grandma's daughter, for what they said was to get her out of a messy financial situation. I learned later on, as this was a few years back, that was really not true, and it was just king weird and kinda creepy. That is to say, it was far from platonic. Most of my family was very upset by this marriage, as you can imagine. Anyhow, yeah, technically my aunt, who I see every few years, is also my grandma. In a way, she is also my dad's sister and his stepmom. IDK it is and was weird. Thanks for reading, Reddit.